Welcome back, guys. I'm redoing one of the lessons that I did on C++, which was lesson 9. So I'm gonna redo my lesson 9 because I didn't quite like the way it came out. I repackaged it. So this will be C++ lesson 9. Lesson 9, and this lesson is on functions. Okay, so I'm going to try and create 3 separate functions that I'll be working with and explaining as we go along, and hopefully I can put it in a slightly different manner than what we had previously. So with our functions, here are the key elements that we need to have. We need to know that a function works in the following manner, like we've got here. Int main is our function. So what we need for our function is, first of all, the data type, which is our int, the main, which gives us a function, our curly brackets, which gives us the content that we want to put within the function, and then a return type follows our int data type that we have described there. So here's how we can quickly work with our functions, or to use our functions in a specific manner. So let's say I want to create a new function, and then my function has a data type of void, and the name of my function is sum, and then I open and I close brackets so that I can be able to get the values that I want for sum. Okay, so in this particular instance, I'll first do a function that doesn't have parameters within it, as follows, and then I'll then put my sum within my main function, which then means I can be able to then call this function from wherever it's located to be able to use it for whatever purposes that I want to use it for. So I can then put my void, and then I put my sum. I open and I close brackets. I open and I close the curly brackets so that I create my function, as we see. So this will then be a function for sum, like that. So what this then means now is we want to be able to get certain attributes or certain values from this particular function. So for example, I can then put 2 variables. I can then put x and y as my variable, and these variables I then want to use them within my function. So I can then type out cout, open and close. I then say enter first value. I close my quotations. I put my end line, and then I put my C in. I put my angle brackets. I put the first value that I want. I can also do the same with the next value. To make it faster, I'll just copy paste this, and then change where it says first value to second value, and then change the variable from x to y, and then from there I can then put my final result, which will be cout sum is, I put my angle brackets again, I then put x plus y, so that I add the 2 values, and then I put my end line, and then by doing this I've actually created my function. So what this simply means is void becomes my data type for my function, sum becomes the name of the function that I want to use, I then put the content that I want to put in my function, which is similar to what we would have seen in other programs. This is what we had previously. And then I call this function at that particular point. So this is actually a function call, whereby I want to call a sum within my main function. And then this is what we call a function prototype, like that. So in other words, we're then saying this is a function prototype, this is our function main, and this is the content that we've got within our function. So what this then means is I can be able to run this. If I've got no errors, I should be able to run it and get to see that point where it says enter the first value. So I can put 6, I press enter, I put the next value 8, and then it then gives me my sum is equal to 14. Okay, so in other words, we've actually created our function sum as a prototype, or the line 4 tells us that our prototype is function sum, and then line 7 calls our function, and then line 10 declares the contents of our function, and we'll be able to see what our function actually does. So this then becomes our function sum, and this is how we actually use it. So in other words, we've actually created a function without any prototypes. So in other words, whatever we have done in this particular instance, we are simply using everything that is within the sum function. However, we can be able to then use prototypes. Not prototypes per se, but we can be able to use parameters. That's what I wanted to work with in the next project. Okay, so I'll create a project. I call it console application. I click on next. I then say C++, and this is lesson 9. And then this is parameter in functions, like that. So I click on next, click on finish, and then we're good to go. So here's how we then want to work with this. Okay, we want to be able to state the name of our function in the same way that we've done, where we create a prototype. Okay, and then our prototype should be able to get certain values from the input, or from the previous function, or from a function that we'll be actually working with. So we then want to be able to say numbers is our function, and then numbers should be able to have an int x and an int y. Okay, by doing this, we have actually created parameters. So this is a parameter called x and y. Okay, so that means by actually putting it this way, we've got our numbers and we've got our int x and our int y. We've actually created parameters for our function. We can then be able to call our numbers. Okay, but you then find the moment I put numbers, it then now is looking for two values, which is x and y, whereby these are integer values. So I can put 10 and 12, like that. I then put my semicolon. It then means I'm then passing these two values to my function numbers, where if I highlight it like this, it then tells me void numbers, and then I've got my 10 and my 12 as the numbers that I want to actually put through to the next function, which is my function numbers. However, we have not yet worked with numbers as a function, so we now need to create numbers again, and then our numbers should then have an int x and an int y, like that. So what this then means, if we've got our numbers as int x and int y, we then now need to state what each value gives us. Okay, so let's say we want to give an output of just what 10 and 12 does. We'll just put some simple code whereby we'll say cout, and in our cout we then say the sum, or rather the product, is, we then put x space asterisk y space end line, like that. Okay, what this then means is we've created our function numbers with the two parameters. We've called our numbers within our main. We've then declared what we want to see in our numbers within the function numbers. So if I run it, I then get the product, where my product is 120 because I've used 10 and 12 within my main function. And my main function got 10 and 12 and passed those two values to my numbers, and my numbers then gives me the product, whereby we're saying 10 multiplied by 12 gives us 120. So that is how we can work with function parameters, and these parameters are then used to give us the result that we are looking for. And this is a function called by value. So in other words, we're actually passing the value from one function to the other function so that we get the result that we are looking for, or the result that we are hoping for. So this then means in this particular instance, you would have actually created a simple function that gets the values that you would have put and displays those values within the main function. So how this pretty much works is, when you have put your two values there, whatever is executed in your numbers is then displayed in your main, although the calculations were done in your function numbers. So I'm hoping that we are still on the same page. Those who might have any questions on some of the things that I'll be stating here, please do feel free to write in the comment section so that at least we can be able to assist each other and take as much from this as is possible. Okay, so lastly, we said we wanted to work with 3 functions. So we want to actually work with another function that's going to be slightly more different from this one, where we want to add some more content to what we have learned before, and see how we can work with that within a real life setting. Okay, so let's create a new project, and then this new project will still be part of this existing project. C++ lesson 9, and then we want to be able to use function in program, like that. Okay, so how do you want to do this? Okay, initially when I started, I was actually working on this project. This is the project that I want to pretty much redo. So in case I forget how I'd actually put it, I may reference it, but I'll try and do something that is slightly different from this particular one. Okay, so here's what we've got. Here's what we've got. We've got a function that we want to create. And this function, we want it to be able to work with our average. Okay, so we want void average fun, like that. Sorry, fun. So we want it to be an average function where we'll be able to actually call it at that particular point, where we'll then say average and we then also want to create its content right there. Okay, but I think I'm gonna change a few things so that it actually gives the content that I want to have. So let's say I put int and then I put let's say max. Okay, let's call it max1 because max already exists as a reserved word. So let's actually leave it and we put it as max1. Okay, so in other words, what we now want to do is we want to be able to put the maximum, okay, the maximum value of our inputs, okay, and we call it max1. In this instance, we then want to also put let's actually put parameters in our main as well. So we then put int and then mx. Okay, in our main we'll call it mx. In our average function we'll call it max. So at this particular point we want to then say cout, and then for our cout we want to be able to say the following. And 9, I want to be able to say enter the maximum number. Okay. When we enter the maximum number, we want to be able to get mx. So we say cin. We then say mx. We close our mx like that. And then we want to pass mx into our average function. So we then put mx so that we know that mx becomes the value that we are passing into the other function. Okay, so we will see how this works in a moment. Now we then want to put some content within our function. Okay, so we would want to have the following. We need these. I'm just going to copy these and put them there, and I'll explain as we proceed how we want to be able to use these values. Okay, so we want to be able to say at this particular point, we want to be able to prompt the user to enter the numbers that we want to calculate the average for. So we want to cout, and then our cout does the following. Okay. Enter numbers to be used. Okay. This then means at this particular point we want to see or we want to enter the numbers that we want to work with for our average. In particular, we then want to work with the following. We want to have a for statement, okay? And our for statement would then be as follows. We want a for I equal to 0. Okay, I is less than max 1. And then we want to be able to say I iterate like that. Okay. From there, we then want to be able to enter the values individually. Okay. So we then say cout, and cout gives us value and then we put our angle brackets, we put I angle brackets, so we put a square bracket, and then put our angle brackets again with an end line like that. From there, we then want to state, or we then want to get the input that the user is supposed to enter. So we then put get val like that, and get val then becomes the value that the user has entered. Okay. From there, we then want to say our sum is equal to sum plus get val. Okay. So that each time that we put the value, we'll be able to get the new input that we've got. Okay. So at this particular stage, we have actually put a function into a way that we can actually be able to run it and work with it until we get to our final answer. I'll explain this as soon as I'm done with the code, but I'm hoping so far we're all on the same page and we can be able to work with it until we get to where we want to get to. Okay, so we're then saying we then now need to calculate the average. Okay, so to calculate our average, we'll then say after all this is done, we want to be able to say AVG is equal to sum divided by max 1 okay, that then gives us the average, and then outside of that we want to have a cout that then gives us the average. Like that. So we then say AVG like that. So what this then means is after doing all of this, we have done what our function requires of us. And by now, I think everything should be in order. Let's just run it and see if there are any errors. Okay, so we want to put the maximum number of values we want to enter. We put 6. So we now want to enter the values that we want. So we put 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, like that. So after adding all of this, we then should get an average of 12, which I think is correct. Because if we say 10 plus 11, we get 21, plus 12, we get 33, plus 13, we get 46, plus 14, we get 70, plus 15, we get 85. 85 divided by 6 roughly should give us 12. So I think our code pretty much makes sense. Okay, so let's just get into explaining how this works. Okay, at this particular point we have said the following. We have said our function prototype is average fun with the parameter of int max. So parameter int max. Okay, in our function main, we also have a parameter which is mx. From there, we then said we have a cout that gives us enter the number, the maximum number that we want, which is our variable for mx, which then gives us the maximum number. We then pass our variable mx into our average function. Average function then gets our mx and uses our mx as part of how the function will then be working. From there, we then go to our average function, which is this average function, where we've got our get value, which is the input that we want to put. So this is input value. From there, we then want to get average. We also want to get sum, like that. Okay. From there, we've got our I. Then we want to enter the numbers to be used, where we'll then use our for statement, which loops a total of m max 1 times, and we iterate each increment of I. We then enter the values at that point, and then each value gets into our get val, and get val, each time that it gets updated, we are then putting that value plus our get val to get the total that we want to get. And then the average is then simply average is equal to sum divided by max 1, which then gives us our average, which when we run it, we then get to put our values as follows. And when we have done all that we need to do, we then get our average being equal to 12, and our execution time is 10 seconds, 0.559 microseconds. And then that way our functions are somewhat complete.